Welcome to From Days to Years. I'm your host, Angie Lee, and I'm here with my special guest and friend, Patrice Payment. Our topic today is about postpartum depression, and Patrice is going to introduce herself and tell you a little bit more about who she is and how she helps moms with postpartum depression. And then we're just going to talk about it. Thanks for coming, Patrice. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Patrice. I am a therapist up in Roswell, Georgia, and I have I was about to say three kids. I have two boys, and I'm happily married. Just a little bit about how I got to where I am. The reason I wanted to help moms was because of my own experience with postpartum and depression and anxiety. And I just saw that there was such a need for it. And it was very isolating. People didn't talk about how hard it was. So, yeah, I used to work with kids. And then when I had my own kids, like I said, I um, noticed that it was harder than I thought it was going to be. So it's kind of what led me to pivot to working with moms only.
Yeah. And so, first of all, what is postpartum depression? I did not have postpartum depression. I didn't have it. I didn't even know what it was at the time. I didn't know about postpartum depression until years later when I heard other moms talking about it. So I had to do a lot of research to find out, what it is and what are the symptoms, what are the treatment, how do you know you have it, some of the negative factors that come with it in terms of how you're viewed in society. So how do you define postpartum depression and what are some of the symptoms?
Well, that's a really good question because I think a lot of moms I noticed think that it means you have to want to hurt your baby to have postpartum depression. I think that comes from actress Brooke Shields when she became more open about her experience. That's what she said. And it's great that she shared her experience, but it's not only wanting to hurt your baby, it's a lot of the symptoms that come with major depression, but it is triggered by the change in hormones that you experience when you have a baby. Um, so it can look like sadness, it can look like crying, it can look like not wanting to eat, not getting enough sleep, which is common when you have a baby. But what I mean by that is not sleeping even when the baby's sleeping. Um, Postpartum depression can also it also encompasses postpartum anxiety, which often is what I see in my practice as moms who can't stop worrying about the health and well-being of their baby. So they're up all night worrying, even if the baby's sleeping. They might be checking the baby's breathing, and so they're constantly like in the room with the baby or looking over the baby. I'm trying to think of some of the other symptoms that I see. It can also look like anger and irritability. Um, and a lot of these symptoms are normal and come with that change in the hormones, but with postpartum depression, it lasts longer than 2 weeks. So many of us get the baby blues, is what it's called. But if it lasts longer than 2 weeks, then that's when it's considered postpartum depression.
And that's what the research, because I didn't know there was such a thing as baby blues. I just heard either you were fine, quote unquote fine. How fine can you be when you push a watermelon out the size of a lemon?
Right.
Fine.
Yeah.
Or either you have postpartum depression. And like you said, so there's a difference. There's baby's blues, which last, you said up to 2 weeks. And I think that's what the research said too. And then anything past that is postpartum depression and can last a lot longer. Um,
Mhm.
Again, I didn't have it. My environment, and I talked to another friend, and she said she did have it, and for her, it was triggered by environmental factors. And I didn't ask what those were, and I didn't ask because sometimes you just don't press folks; they're just not ready to talk about it, and I get it. And she said she wished she had gotten counseling for it. And hers, I think, came after her second child. I don't think she had it with her first one. So maybe some things happened in her environment, which could have been anything from financial or stress in the marriage or a divorce or something with parents or the pregnancy was really bad. And so for her, that's what happened. Like I said, I didn't have it, but the difference between baby blues and postpartum depression, when moms come to you and say, "I'm just sad all the time," you know, I'm just sad. I don't know what to do. What do you tell them?
Well, I think we have to kind of figure out where the sadness is coming from. Is it sadness about feeling guilty? A lot of times what I see is mom guilt and that feeling
Mm,
sad because they don't love being a mom as much as they thought they would.
yeah,
And so we talk about that and how it's okay. Not every moment of motherhood is fun and glamorous, as you know. But especially in the beginning, if this is their first baby or their second, um, you know, it's hard. It's a big adjustment. So it's okay if you're not loving every minute of it. Um, I think it just depends on the situation and how bad it is. If it's sad to the point that they're not finding any joy in their life or things that they used to enjoy, I might recommend seeing a psychiatrist or a doctor to get on medication. But
yeah,
that's usually not my first line of defense.
right.
That's something that I would recommend if it's to the point where it seems more severe. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Because one of the things, so I don't like a lot of medication. Now, if you need medication, please take it. But my
Yeah.
thing is more homeopathic, trying to discover what the root cause is, what's going on, not just with postpartum depression, because again, I didn't have that, but other things like if I'm sick or my daughter is sick or she's upset about something or whatever it is, I do a lot of homeopathic. So I love that you said that, let's find out what's going on, why are you sad? Why are you feeling like this? You know, because in society we're taught motherhood is great. It's the most wonderful thing in your life. You're gonna love it. You're gonna be a perfect mom. And it's not like that at all.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
perfect days, but there aren't perfect weeks and months and years.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think a lot of it is just normalizing some of those feelings, and that can kind of alleviate some of that sadness because, like, if they're in their head thinking about all these things and feeling more and more sad about feeling sad, you know what I mean? It just makes it worse. But another thing that I thought of while you were talking was, I want to make sure that they are still doing something for themselves.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Yes.
like, I have a well mom checklist that I send out, and it goes through and it says, have you showered today? Have you eaten breakfast? Have you brushed your teeth? Have you talked to someone other than the baby? Like, have you talked to another adult? Maybe phoned a friend or talked to your mom or your spouse or whoever. Have you gotten outside for 5 minutes, like just to get some fresh air? Um, I can't remember what the other things are, but it's just like kind of those like things that we take for granted that we forget about after we have a baby because everything is all about them, and we
Mhm.
kind of have to like bring it back and make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. So sometimes just by doing that, that can make a big difference too.
I think that's great. That's something I didn't see in the research was a well mom check, check in with yourself. And I just love that, what's going on in your day that might be contributing to these feelings and emotions and these thoughts. And how can we
Mhm.
get through some of those things to help you get better. I love that. So when a mom first comes to you, whether she says she's sad or just doesn't know what's going on, she just says, I just don't know what's going on. What's the first thing you do? And like, do you line out, okay, these are the things we're gonna do from day one to week seven? Or do you know how long does it take? Does it vary by mom? Like what's the process when you're helping a mom with postpartum depression?
Yeah, so my first session starts with really getting to understand what's going on. I do a thorough assessment of all the symptoms. And then we also talk about other things like their support system,
Yeah.
their family of origin. Like, is some of this coming from like maybe their relationship with their own mom and the expectation that they had what motherhood was going to be like, you know? We talk about coping skills. Do they have a sense of spirituality? Do they have other coping skills? Do they like, do they already, what are things that they used to do before the baby was there? Like, were they, did they do yoga or did they exercise? Did they meditate? Did they like to do art or journal? That kind of thing. Um, what else do we talk about? Yeah. And so once that the first session is, really spent get digging in and diving deep and trying to find out, like I said, like where's some of this stuff coming from? Like what is the root, but also what is their support like? And then I usually send them home with that well mom checklist to try to work on in between that session and the next time we talk so that I can look at it and we can look at it together and say, okay, now what areas are you, I don't want to say falling behind because it's not to make them feel bad about it. It's just to kind of understand like where can we improve? Like what can we focus on for the next few weeks to help you take better care of yourself? Um, and then in my practice, I do a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. So I also,
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, so that is helping you to understand how your thoughts and your behaviors are related and kind of what are some of the things that are not helpful that you're either doing or you're thinking.
Ah,
So that well mom checklist kind of goes in along with the behavioral side of it. It's like seeing what they're doing and what they can improve on, what they can do more often to feel better. But the cognitive side of it is understanding like negative thoughts. And we all have these automatic negative thinking styles that we fall into. It's kind of, and when I explain it to people, I usually talk about like a rainy day. So if you look out the window and you see that it's cloudy, and it might be actually, um, um, and sometimes if you're in a negative frame of mind already, you're gonna think, oh man, it's cloudy, it's gonna rain all day. I'm gonna be late for work because traffic's gonna be bad. I'm not gonna get to go for a walk, and my day is just gonna be horrible.
yeah,
But I mean, all those things could happen, but just
right.
because it's cloudy doesn't mean all that's going to happen, right? So that is a thing that we call future thinking. Um,
Mm,
it's predicting the future. We don't know that just because it's cloudy, it's going to rain and all these bad things are going to happen. It's kind of also like when I was talking about the mom that has the fear of something bad happening to the baby. So what they do is they think just because the baby's making a noise that something's wrong. And then they think, well, the baby's going to die. What would happen to me if the baby died? So I have to sit over here and like watch the baby all the time because if I don't, then this is going to happen. And then, oh my gosh, what if my husband dies? And what if this happens? And, it's like a snowball effect.
yeah.
So my job in as the therapist in cognitive behavioral therapy is to help them identify those negative thinking patterns and figure out how to stop them before they snowball. And so what we do is we talk about kind of the surrounding um I have another worksheet that I like to use for this, but
Okay.
we talk about like the surrounding events, like what triggered it, what feelings were associated with it. And then we explore the thoughts and we have like different prompts that I ask them that are like, what's another way of thinking about this? Maybe that's the worst that could happen, but what's the best case scenario? Like, what's another scenario? And how likely is that to happen? Like, which one's most likely? Is it always the worst case? No. Usually it's somewhere in between. So it's kind of like figuring out ways to think about really anything. Um, Tell me if I'm going too fast because this
No,
is my jam. So,
no, no, I like this. So I have two questions. So
okay.
one being with postpartum depression is because every patient is different. So does every patient come in, they'll come in with similar symptoms or different symptoms So, but they all get cognitive therapy? Do they all need it? Do they all have that same future kind of future forecasting of what the worst case scenario is? So do they all need that, or are there different types of postpartum depression? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. No, there are definitely that was kind of what I was saying before. There are different types of postpartum depression, but my specialty is postpartum anxiety. So I see a lot of moms with anxiety, also postpartum OCD.
Oh,
Um, and then they're all kind of under the umbrella of maternal mood disorder, postpartum mood disorders, or maternal mental health.
oh,
There's also postpartum what is it? PTSD. So like they can
oh,
have trauma from the birth experience that
oh,
causes PTSD. Yeah.
oh,
I don't know. I'm sure you've heard about like a mom who had a traumatic birth and they thought that, maybe you haven't heard of anyone, but I have, that they thought something bad was going to happen to the baby and they had a C-section and all these like things can maybe they didn't feel like they were being listened to in the birthing process and that was traumatic. So all those things can lead to different symptoms. Not everyone is doing the automatic negative thinking. I
okay,
think many people are. Like you may not know off the top of your head a time you did that. And maybe when you did it, it wasn't to the extreme where you like snowballed. You were able to say, that's not necessarily going to happen.
right.
So does that make sense?
It does. It does. I know people. Actually, I know someone in particular. It's not postpartum depression, but this person um, likes to think often about what could happen next. Well, what if this happens and this happens and this happens, and then it does keep going. And I'm like, but it's not going to get to that extreme. So why even consider that?
Yeah,
Why do people do that? Or why do moms and who have postpartum depression, why do they do that? Why does their brain go that way?
that's a good question. I think it's a chemical imbalance often, but it could also be from kind of just the events that they've experienced. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
The trauma they've experienced.
Yeah, I also believe that there are certain types of people that are more prone to fall into this anxiety, and it's people that are more of a thinker, like their personality is more of a thinker. So I don't know if you've heard anyone say, I'm all in my head or like they're all in their head. Like it's more of that type A, like things have to be a certain way, perfectionist type
Yeah, yeah.
person. Um, and so they have to have an explanation for things. I'm this person, so I'm like, doesn't everyone do that? But I guess not.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That someone who thinks a lot is going to think about all the different scenarios and then maybe get caught up in one particular future forward thinking negative type of thought,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, which could be overwhelming in a bad way.
Yeah, but I think the positive spin on all of this is that you can train your brain to stop. Like you can be more of a positive person. It just takes practice and it usually takes somebody to help you. I mean, it's not something you can necessarily do on your own. I think going through some type of cognitive therapy or learning about it, there's definitely help. And same with postpartum depression. I think just kind of knowing that you're not alone and it's not something that you're doing wrong,
Yeah.
you know, can be very helpful.
For someone who does need cognitive therapy and they for someone who does need cognitive therapy and doesn't know that they need it, what are some signs that say, hey, you might need this? I mean, we talked about some of the symptoms and signs of postpartum depression, but specifically people who might need cognitive therapy, what would you say are these are some warning or some red flags that you might want to think about getting help?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is when you start to notice that you are maybe like avoiding things that you used to do, like places that you used to go, or um, like, things that you used to enjoy doing. Like once any with any mental health issue, once it starts interfering with your daily life, that's when it's helpful, when you might need to get help. Um, like maybe it's interfering with your ability to do your job. And if you don't work outside of the home, it interferes with your ability to take care of your kids.
Mhm.
Um, and I think we also can kind of use our support system as indicators. Like if someone in your family starts to notice something is off, and if people have like said, I think something might be wrong, do you know what I'm saying? Like having other people notice, because we don't always see how things are for ourselves. So often it takes somebody else kind of suggesting.
Like almost like a prompt, like a key prompt that, and kind of encouraging you to do that. Because again, with postpartum depression, from the research that I've read and a couple of moms that I talked to, it's kind of like it's a negative thing. And I think it's becoming more and more accepted now. And then I
Mhm.
also heard that fathers can get it too. We're going to concentrate on mothers, but I've heard that fathers can get it too. But it's still like a kind of a negative thing. Well, what's wrong with you? You should be happy. You're a mom. It's a wonderful thing, but it is very challenging. Not just the whole birth process is trauma to your body in a way. Um, but also you are now responsible for this life. And if it's your first responsibility for this life, that can be a lot. And if you have now it's you have multiple children, and maybe some situations have changed in your life that are not as great environmental factors, then that can add to stress. And if you don't have help, and you thought you were going to have help or you need help, just helping to
Mhm.
take care of the kid, it can be traumatic. And I wish that it wasn't such a negative thing for people to say that they have postpartum depression, or it wasn't. I wish we didn't put so much stress and pressure on ourselves as moms to say that things have to be perfect or this has to go a certain way. It's not going to be perfect. I mean, this year for us, which has nothing to do with postpartum depression, has been very difficult in terms of what's going on at our daughter's school with her. We but the way that I went about it, the way we went about it with my husband was just identifying what was going on and reaching out and contacting people and getting support and then advocating. And I think with any kind of situation going on in our life, whether it's postpartum depression or the situation we've had with our daughter for this year at her school, is speaking up and not being embarrassed and saying, I need a support team. And maybe the support team that you thought you have is not who you need. You know,
Mhm.
whether it's growing, getting Facebook groups, or definitely seeking a therapist if you were going to hurt yourself or your child, and then maybe getting some other friends, because sometimes the people you have in your life aren't really the support you need. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, there's a place, an organization called Postpartum Support International, and I
Mhm.
think a lot of people don't really know about them, but they have a helpline that's staffed 24/7, so people can call them, but they also can help you find the right therapist or maybe a support group. They also have groups online. Like they have a group for moms of twins, they have a group for dads, they have a
Wow.
group for postpartum depression. So yeah, I think like there are a lot of resources out there, but a lot of people don't know about them. So just telling somebody, and then what I have said before is just keep telling, don't keep talking about it. Like if the first person kind of brushes you off, like
Mhm.
I've had clients say that like they told their mom and their mom was like, you need to figure this out. Like you're okay. You know what I mean? Just because I think that
Mm.
the older generation
Yes.
wasn't accepting of mental health treatment as our current generation is. So
Mhm.
just keep telling people and keep talking about it and keep asking for help. But if people don't know where to reach out, they can always call. I don't know if you link like anything in the notes,
I
but we
can.
can, we can maybe link the Postpartum Support International there. Um, Yeah, and I think like sometimes another thing that you said as you were talking, I was thinking about it. Like it's not just about like if you have support, but it may be that this time when you got pregnant, you got a new job or your husband got a new job or something like that.
Mhm.
That can cause postpartum depression. Like there are certain things that are triggers to stress or different stressors that may happen to us, like you said, that may make it more likely. So I agree. Just not to be afraid to reach out.
And I wonder if there's like a vitamin deficiency too, because it's like your body just had a baby. I mean, it's
Mhm.
no offense to men, but sometimes when they get sick or hurt themselves, they are a little, I don't want to be insensitive here, a little bit of a crybaby, okay? But women who've had an actual, they carried this life in your body for 9 months or 8 months or 7 months or 6 months or 5 months or how many months it's been, and then you birth it. I don't think men understand how traumatic
Right.
it is. So like your body's been feeding this baby this whole time, and now the baby's out, and then are you is your body getting, or is it going to get, or do we even look at what vitamins you need to replenish what was just taken out and what's been feeding off of you for this amount of time that it's in there? So I wonder if they look at like vitamin deficiencies and caloric intake and all that kind of stuff to see if that could help aid moms who have had postpartum depression. I don't know. Kind of rambling here, but there's a point in there
No,
somewhere.
no, you're absolutely right. I was thinking I heard it explained once. It's the one time, well, not the one time, depending on how many children you have, but it's the only time in your life when you have like the biggest depletion of hormones
Mm,
because everything is like sucked out of you, not just the baby, but all these other things. So that was why I mentioned making sure that you're eating, drinking water, exercising, you're like taking care of yourself. But yeah, I think studying that would be interesting to know more about like specific vitamin deficiencies. But it's definitely the more importance for taking care of yourself, right?
yeah,
And
it
just
is.
also just understanding that like it's going to take me probably 6 months to a year, maybe longer, to feel like a human being again.
Yeah. I remember when I used to take our daughter into the grocery store or someplace, and if I didn't have her, my favorite questions, favorite in a sarcastic tone would be, "Where's the baby? How's the baby? And why didn't you bring the baby?" And
Hmm.
I'm a person too, and it was just a funny thing, but after a while, you're like, "What? Wait, but you gonna ask about me?"
Right. Yeah.
That sounds kind of selfish, but it was funny for a while. But then after month after month after month, if I didn't have her with me, those three questions: Where's the baby? How's the baby? Why didn't you bring the baby? I'm
Yeah.
glad they wanted to see her, but I'm like,
Yeah. I know.
it wasn't that bad, but it was just interesting because I used to kid my husband about that all the time. So one of
Yeah.
the things that when I was doing some research on postpartum depression, they said that moms who have PPD, that it can have a negative effect on the baby as the baby is maturing and getting older. Can you talk a little bit about that, the effects on the baby?
Yeah. I mean, it absolutely does. I think we always talk about how moms have to take care of themselves before they can take care of the baby. I don't know if you've heard that metaphor of the oxygen mask and how we have to put our own
Yes.
oxygen mask on first,
Yeah.
you know? Because if you have postpartum depression or anxiety, it can really hinder your ability to take care of yourself, but also your ability to take care of the baby. So, I don't know specifics on the research, but just from my own assumptions, that is because it's just difficult to give the baby what they need and like all the attention that they would get if you were thriving and, you know, feeling great. So, yeah.
That makes sense. What are some of your success stories that you like would like to say? Like, I met this mom, and this is where she was, and not in a good place. And then after I worked with her, and we got her to a place where she felt good about herself, and it was just an awesome. Can you talk without naming names or giving specifics because we can't? It's like HIPAA about other
Right.
people. But just uh, allude to some of your success stories.
Like just hearing that you're not alone can be really
Yeah,
big. And I've had clients that once they heard that it was normal, but also that like their baby was okay, even though they were struggling with breastfeeding. Like, and they weren't a bad mom because they weren't because they were choosing to pump and feed their baby a bottle or
yeah,
give the baby formula. Like some of those experiences, just it's just like a aha moment, when like it was something that they were afraid to say to anybody else, but
yeah,
in the privacy of a therapeutic setting, like they felt like they could share some of that guilt that they were feeling. And you know then they came back the next week and they were like, actually, I've been feeling a lot better and I've been doing the things we talked about. And then they didn't need the best the best and worst is when they don't need to come to see me anymore. It's like I hate it for business, but it's like, okay, well, I'm actually helping people and they don't need to come back. And it happens. And I have a group that I run that is like moms coming together to talk about this stuff. And when they can like kind of hear from other people that they're not alone and kind of hear different tips that other moms have for dealing with some of this stuff, um, I think that is big too. And I have a mom that I've been seeing for I don't know, maybe 18 months now, and her youngest is just turning 2, and she's like, I feel like I'm coming out of a fog, like I can see the light. And
yeah.
she is one mom. Often in my job, I don't get a lot of thank you, but she's one that's always like, thank you so much. I just can't emphasize enough how much it's helped. So yeah.
I love what she said. Well, there are many things that you said that I love, but one of the last things you said that just sticking in my mind is I'm coming out of a fog.
Hmm.
I think that's a great way of saying it. I'm coming out of a fog.
Yeah.
I love that. 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 Um, so are there moms that maybe you can't help and they need like a more intensive therapy or something? And what type of mom would that be? Where you're like, you know what, I want to help you. These are the things I can do, but I think you might need a little bit more than what I can do. And then what type of mom is that, and who should they see?
So I would say the one thing for me, I don't work as much. Well, I don't work at all with couples. So as you can imagine, having a baby causes a disruption in relationships, as you
Okay.
know, I'm sure. But I wouldn't say a disruption, but a change.
Hmm.
And there are some moms that come to me that have more of an issue where there's enough conflict that they really need to see a couples therapist.
Hmm.
Because I can work with the mom and say things to the mom, but when the partner's not there, it's not enough. And so sometimes I think there's this like frustration on my part and also their part that like things aren't getting better, but it's because what they really need is to see a couples therapist. Um, so that would be one example. I'm trying to think. I haven't had a lot. I had a mom that had pretty severe postpartum OCD, and at the
Oh,
time I didn't feel like I could help her. I didn't feel like I knew enough about it to help her, so I did refer her to a therapist that specialized in it. Um, I do have a little more experience with that now. I feel like I can help, but I think if there was another client that came in to that degree, I would have to kind of see. Like
yeah.
it really just depends on the situation. Um, so, you know, if there's a mom that is having, well, that's another one I just thought of. Like there is another thing called postpartum psychosis that we didn't touch on,
I
but
don't know what's
it
that.
has been in the news lately, where have voices telling you to do things, or that might be the situation where a mom feels they have voices telling them to hurt the baby.
Ooh,
Now that would be more of an emergent
yes,
situation where they would need to be in the hospital and
yes,
monitor 24/7.
yes,
And that's something that I wouldn't be able to help with, but that doesn't mean that all of these scenarios there is help. It's just
yes,
not in my scope.
yes, yes. That
So
makes. I hadn't heard about the psychosis one.
yeah,
That's
it's
rough.
very rare. Like, I don't mean to scare anybody, but it is a possibility. It's only, I think it happens in like 1% or
Oh,
something like that. So it is very rare. And, in those cases, there is help, like I said, like going into a hospital and having medication monitoring, being monitored at all times until they're more stabilized. They do recover. So it's called, yeah, anyway.
wow. I hadn't heard about
It's
that
really
one.
sad.
That's, that's a lot. I hope, oh gosh, I hope those moms get the help they need because that's a lot to deal with. That's
Well,
a lot.
it's helpful. I think I didn't mean to scare anyone by talking about it, but it's also good to talk about it because if it ever happens, people need to know what to do. So,
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Wow. What are some other things that you want to mention or talk about that you think it's important for moms to hear who either are maybe they're pregnant now and some things to do now before the baby is born? Uh,
mhm.
so that's one mom. Another mom who just gave birth, what are some things you would say do now to if you can avoid postpartum? And then the third group is they're beyond baby blues and what should they do now? So what should you do while you're pregnant to avoid postpartum depression? What can you do after the baby's born to avoid it? And then if it comes, it comes. What should you do? So those three moms.
Um, so I would say as a pregnant mom, the best thing you can do is kind of line up your support system. There are some risk factors to having it that I don't think we touched on it a little bit, but if you already know that you have uh anxiety and depression, like you kind of have a tendency to struggle with that, then you might want to,
Predisposed.
yeah, you might want to go ahead and set up a therapist that can see you like while you're pregnant, and then after you have the baby, go ahead and even put those appointments on your calendar just to set you up for success so that you're not trying to find someone and trying to get the guts to find someone when it gets worse. You know what I mean? And then having like a team of providers, like if you can, even better, have like a doula to help you along the way, someone to kind of walk along with you and be there for support. And then just to be more aware of like what are some of the things we can look out for. Um, like, am I taking care of myself? Am I eating? Am I showering? Am I sleeping? Um, and then that would kind of go for the mom who is pregnant and for the mom who's already had the baby. But if they already feel like they're experiencing it, um, just reaching out for help and not being afraid,
Yeah.
not being embarrassed, and knowing that even though you are experiencing it, it's not your fault. You know, did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Before we wrap up, what other topics within postpartum depression do you want to mention or talk about? Things that you've seen, or you're just like, I just need to tell people this, or um, just something else that you want to just add to kind of maybe warn moms or just celebrate moms? What else would you like to say?
I mean, I feel like a broken record, but I just want to reiterate that it's okay to ask for help. And whatever that looks like depends on what's going on and, where you are. Maybe it's just reaching out to like a support group in your area, just sometimes just having the support of other women. Like when I had my kids, I joined what's called Moms Club. And those women, those moms are who I still rely on today.
Yeah, no,
Um,
some moms.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So just not to do it alone would be my biggest takeaway.
And talking about your own experience, did so you joined the moms club because you recognized that there were some things that you're like, you know what, this I maybe this isn't right. I shouldn't be feeling this way, or I am feeling this way, whichever way you'd like to term it. What are some other things that you did? Because but did you get a therapist, or is that what made you say, you know what, I want to talk to moms because I didn't have a therapist, or the therapist I have wasn't the greatest.
Yeah.
So during your postpartum um, depression cycle that you went through, did you have a therapist, or is that what made you want to get more into therapy for moms? I know you talked about you used to work with kids.
Yeah, so what happened in my experience was I saw my OBGYN for the follow-up visit. The assessment that they make you fill out in the doctor's office, remember, like it asks you certain questions. And my doctor said, um, I think you're having some depression. And he handed me a list of like breastfeeding groups because I was having a hard time with that. And because the baby wouldn't eat, then I was just like tired all the time because baby wasn't eating, so the baby wasn't sleeping because he was hungry.
Oh,
But anyway, the more I talked to other moms, the more they were telling me like it was going to get better, not to give up, and just kind of like I had a good mom friend that told me get outside every day and walk, put the baby in the stroller and walk.
yeah.
Um, and so I didn't seek therapy then. And then when I had my second, that was whenever I decided to be a stay-at-home mom. And that was when I joined the moms group because I knew that like I didn't want to do it by myself. Like I needed support. And plus we just needed to get out of the house and like make friends, all of my friends were didn't have kids at the time. So
Oh,
yeah.
that would be difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really didn't realize that what I had was postpartum depression until much, much later, until I was trying to do this work. So
Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on today and talking about what you do and how you enrich moms' lives by, just being there for them. I think a big part of this, whether it's postpartum depression or something else, is being there for a mom. And like you said, then they come in the office and it's like, I get to tell someone something and they can't take it out of those four walls.
right.
Having a true confidant. And a lot of times as moms or as women, we don't have true confidants. And when you have that, it can make you feel so much better. And
Right.
especially when you have that connection with someone, it sounds like you have a great connection with your clients and you are doing wonderful work. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
Awesome. It was good to see you, Patrice. Thank you so much for coming on. Y'all make sure you like and subscribe. And we'll also put out some links from Patrice's business as well as some of the things that she talked about so you can see that. See you soon. Bye.